Hi, my name is Dr. David Scratchley. I'm a psychologist who specializes in addiction in Seattle, Washington. I care for both adults and adolescents who are addicted. And today I'd like to talk with you about alcohol and also about inhalants at the same time, vaporous inhalants that may contain alcohol-like compounds. So I'd like to invite you first of all to visit my website, which is called www.drugseminars.net, where you'll find the study guide that I'm using today, and feel free to download that, and hopefully it will be of use as well as other information on the site. So to begin with, as we start to deal with the issue of alcohol, one of the things that's important to note is that alcohol is a very, very serious adolescent problem. When we look at this, we discover that alcohol is responsible for many, many deaths of people between the ages of middle school and senior high school due to a whole host of issues. First of all, of course, is the risk of overdose. This is called alcohol poisoning. And every day, if you were to look across the entire nation, you would discover that 2 middle school age kids on average die from alcohol poisoning. Now, a large part of the reason that they die is that they actually don't realize that alcohol can be toxic or poisonous at high doses. And as a result, the younger person who is naive or inexperienced with alcohol may decide that they need to drink a lot of alcohol to get drunk. And what we discover is, especially if the person drinks shots of alcohol, what that does is it shuts the valve at the bottom end of the stomach off, and the alcohol, if you will, collects in the stomach. And then what occurs here is, after the alcohol is collected in the stomach, if you, for example, wait long enough, or if you even drink a carbonated beverage with, say, a Coke or a Pepsi, that causes the valve at the end of the stomach to suddenly open, and the contents of the stomach, all that alcohol, flow into the small intestine, which is designed to absorb that alcohol. So you get a very rapid increase in blood alcohol level, and as a result, you may get into a state where you actually pass out. Now, another issue is that a lot of times both younger people and adults somehow think that the risk of poisoning has gone away when the individual passes out or loses consciousness. It's far from true. The blood alcohol level may still be climbing, and it might be very, very soon after passing out that that person actually dies from the alcohol. The other major event that occurs here is that as the person drinks, they may black out. And in a blackout, the person is awake and unable to remember what he or she has done. So it's possible that they can be victims of crimes or commit crimes themselves, not even know that they did it, as a result of a blackout. And when they recover from the alcohol, they may have very little or at all any recall of what occurred. The other big deal that happens here is that, of course, when people drink, they have accidents, head injuries from falling downstairs, falling out of cars. If they drive, they may cause a car accident, and this is, of course, a very serious event. If you were to look in your average high school, 1 in 1,000 of the kids in that school will die by the time of graduation due to an automobile accident in which alcohol was involved, and that's, of course, very tragic. Now, the drug starts to damage, alcohol being a drug, starts to damage both the nervous system, the heart, and the liver very early on. So even after 5 years of significant drinking, you'll see damage to the heart, and approximately 8 years you start to see differences in the nervous system of those who drink and those who don't. And of course, the liver is under constant attack when we drink. So the action of the drug starts at a very, very rapid rate to do damage to the body. Additionally, it's well worth noting that when we binge drink, that could even be potentially more damaging, because it sets the nervous system up to have very high doses of alcohol, and some people have said that even may make it more likely that the person has alcohol-related seizures that they keep on drinking later in life. Alcohol produces depression. It produces anxiety and withdrawal. People who drink get depressed and anxious. It's that simple. If you were to look at people who drink, even adolescents who drink, you discover that regular drinkers who drink large quantities of alcohol are much more likely to commit suicide as a result of drinking and using alcohol. So when we think about it, what we discover is that alcohol is actually a very, very serious drug. And a lot of adolescents don't really see it that way, perhaps because our society doesn't really take a clear stand on alcohol. Now, alcohol's actions cover a broad range, and if we were to look at this, what we discover is that virtually all physical systems in the body are damaged, but it is especially damaging, highly damaging in the brain and in the liver and the heart. So we discovered that even after maybe 10 years of drinking, a person can have really noticeable differences in how they think or how well their brain works. Now, when we look at the group of people who are drinking today, some of these people will become alcoholics. And alcoholics, of course, have a real struggle that covers their entire life to stay free of the drug. And as a result, alcoholism is a terrible and very serious condition that results in many, many deaths, even at a young age. And additionally, is just fundamentally probably one of the worst ways when you're drinking alcohol on a daily basis to exist, because it begins to feel very depressing, very sickening. So we like to avoid that for our younger people. Of course, alcohol disrupts eye-hand coordination and slows our reaction time in the body, but also after use. We find that we just aren't up to par. So if you're an athlete, for example, you're not going to play well if you have been using alcohol. And that's been well shown time after time. Alcohol, when it's in your body, is going to reduce anxiety and elevate mood in the early part of drinking. But when we're in withdrawal, the user is going to experience a huge increase in anxiety. Their hands are going to tremor, their eye movements are going to be erratic, and they're going to get depressed. The most sensitive system in our body for alcohol's effects is actually judgment, where even after one drink, we discover a person will become much poorer at making judgments and making assessments about what's appropriate or what's not. And anybody who's ever been to a social event, say at work, can probably attest to the fact that this works in this manner. So alcohol is a very serious type of compound. Now, there's some other things to think about here. And when we start to talk about what's occurring with middle school, for example, age kids, we discovered that not only is alcohol a great attracting agent, but when the kids can't get a hold of alcohol, a lot of times what will happen here is they may decide to inhale or huff some type of compound. Now, this is a very serious event because propellants in the huffing compound, whether it's a spray paint or sometimes like a computer dust-off or even markers, can really expose the body to cancer-activating agents, and the propellants carry these agents into the brain where terrible damage is done. So even though it alters the activity of nerve cells and makes a user feel a little bit drunk, it comes with a terrible consequence, and that consequence can be permanent brain damage. So if we know somebody's using an inhaled substance, we need to get involved with that very, very quickly. So if you find remnants of spray paint cans or other things, it's well worth investigating this, because it's an extremely common behavior in the middle school, because these compounds are so easily available. And since it's a desire maybe to drink or get drunk, but we can't get the alcohol, people turn to these compounds. Now, I want to thank you for listening today to this discussion about alcohol. And I'd also like to invite you to go to my website and hopefully download this particular material if you find it useful at my website here. And here, let's put that back up there. It's www.drugseminars.net. At this website, you'll also find other material I think you'll find interesting, or at least useful if you're trying to determine if your adolescent is using drugs or becoming involved with drugs. So please feel free to contact me at seattleclinical@gmail.com if you have any questions. Thank you.